Welcome to Front Page. Bengaluru calls itself the city of the future. But what if our biggest mistake is that we treat the future like a forecast instead of a skill? At the sidelines of BLR Hubba, Futures Hubba, anchored by Unboxing BLR Foundation, right inside Alliance Francaise, one voice called this out. The future is already misunderstood, end quote. That voice belongs to Riel Miller, economist and former head of futures literacy at UNESCO, who argues that leaders don't need more prediction, they need better ways to use the future, which is to learn, to adapt, to stay sane inside uncertainty. Amit Raja Naik is, of course, on the ground at Bengaluru Hubba. Amit, if you're all set, take it away.
We're reporting today from Bengaluru Hubba right here at Alliance Francaise at the Future Hub. Some very interesting conversation is happening here as we speak. Not about what's next, but about how we imagine change itself. So we are asking how leaders imagine change and why misunderstanding the future may be our biggest risk. At the same time, AI for maths is taking a new form in the era of AI, and how AI is redefining art and entertainment. That's exactly why this matters today on Front Page.
We have the former head of futures literacy from UNESCO. Welcome to the show, Riel.
Thank you.
Happy to have you here.
Yes, real pleasure.
Yeah, so I happened to attend your talk. Pretty interesting in terms of how future is misunderstood, right? So that is very amazing, and the timing could not be any perfect. Davos is happening on the other end, and I really liked some of the conversations or the insights that you provided. So to our viewers, can you tell them what is futures literacy and how it works and why it's important? Yes.
Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah.
Futures literacy is a capability. It's a competency. And it builds on something that everybody has, because everybody uses the future all the time. You get up in the morning, you decide how to get dressed. You want to cross the street, you have to calculate the trajectory of the cars and the scooters and all the rest. When you cross the street, it's because you want to get to the other side of the street. So we use the future all the time. We are living organisms that anticipate.
Understood.
But there's something very special about the future, which is that it doesn't exist. It's not there yet. If it was now, it wouldn't be the future. So the future has to be imagined when we want to use it as humans, consciously. And the really interesting thing is that there's many different kinds of futures. And those different kinds of futures help us to see different things. So when I say the future is misunderstood, what I mean is that people tend to not think about what is the future, or that there are different kinds of futures. So we're kind of like people who can speak, who can use language, but we don't know how to read or write.
Understood.
So this is an idea that we can become more capable of understanding the power of the future and being kind of conversant with the way the world works, because the future is our entry point into time.
Understood.
Past, present, and future. And this is really powerful stuff, because you care about the future. You're frightened of the future. You're hopeful for the future. You're motivated by the future. You plan your day on the basis of the future. So the future is something really central to being human, to survival, but it can be also a way for us to be more comfortable with not knowing. And the reason that it's really an interesting thing, you cannot know the future. Nobody can know the future. Everybody's equal. I'm a futurist, so-called.
Got it.
But I don't know the future any more than you do. What I know more about, because I study that, is the way people think about the future now.
Understood. So, and talking about now, right? So a lot of conversation is happening. So United States has come up with something called as Board of Peace. Yes, I'm sure you're familiar with that. So are we seeing like the formation of Third World War kind of a situation because of these kind of conversations? Or how do you see overall in terms of, how do we build a world which I mean, that is the future that we're talking about. How do you see this unfolding?
First thing I want to say very clearly is humans do not create the future.
Understood.
Okay, so this pretension that
Understood.
somehow we're going to control and determine what happens, is really arrogant and false.
Understood.
Even if we tell the story of the hero afterwards, for those of the people who are in the tech world and they like Steve Jobs, they should go listen to his commencement speech from Stanford 15 years ago,
Yes.
in which he says he had no idea what he was doing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
He was very lucky. Many of the things that he thought were bad turned
Yes.
out to be good,
Yes.
and many of the things that were good turned out to be bad. So if we think we can control the future, determine the future, win the future, conquer the future, impose the future, colonize the future, this is toxic.
Understood.
It's toxic for the world, and it's toxic for ourselves, because we'll be disappointed, we'll be frustrated. Why didn't the great leader's promise come true?
Correct.
Well, that's because the great leader should not make that promise, and you should not expect the great leader to make that promise. In other words, we're like children who say, oh, well, Papa is going to take care of everything. Well, for a little while that works because we're very vulnerable and fragile as children. That's the way humans are. But when we grow up, when the first time you go to a party and you say, what shoes am I going to wear so that they think I'm cool? And then you arrive at the party and everybody's wearing the same shoes and you look silly. Say, damn, how come I can't control the world? How come I can't know what's going to happen? And you discover that you have to deal with ambiguity, emergence, novelty, and not knowing. And not knowing is the gateway to learning. So if we think that we need to know everything in advance, we're basically saying we don't need to learn anything.
Understood.
So that position of humans, which is that I need to be secure and safe by conquering, by dominating, by controlling, that is the origin, in some senses, of our violent relationship to each other and to our planet. And today we see the fruit of that relationship. It's a sick relationship. So if we can begin to grow up and be less preoccupied with certainty, knowing the future, dominating tomorrow, winning the bet, then I think we can become more healthy, more at home in our universe. And what that means is it means not giving up on betting. I still need to bet on making dinner. I still need to bet on crossing the street. A baby still needs to cry to get fed. All these things still need to happen. But we need to understand that at every moment in life is both open and closed. Not knowing and knowing. And that we close it by coming here, by listening to this, you're there, you can't go back. At the same time, you don't know what you're going to learn. If you think you know what you're going to learn, then you're not going to learn anything.
Correct. That is pretty powerful. Thank you. So yeah, just on the again back to Davos. So the current conversation is kind of setting the precedent. You told clearly that you cannot control the future. So that is pretty evident. But those kind of conversations the leaders are having, and you have worked with some of these leaders as well.
Yeah.
So what are your takeaway of this entire thing unfolding? Because they said the conversation is happening is now stopping the war, peace, climate, and you have AI. So
look,
yeah,
when things start to decline, when things start to die, they can do so in ways that are more or less graceful, more or less generous.
Understood.
So the old order, for many reasons, is no longer functional. It doesn't work the way it worked at one point. But this is true about living organisms. This is true. This is our universe. If the dinosaurs didn't die, we might not be here.
Yeah.
things need to end. And what's happening, I think, today is that a number of things that worked and that looked like they were made out of concrete and would last forever, but underneath the surface, there was a lot going on. There was a lot of change taking place, and they reach a point where they're dying or dead. Now, these days, we see in popular culture a lot of zombie kind of things. Well, zombie are living dead. They don't know they're dead, and they're trying to make the living die. That's kind of a normal reaction. But it's really time for us to see new things being born and to let go of the things that are dying, to try and find different ways of doing things. So in many ways, I think, the people at Davos, to my mind, look rather foolish and immaturely pretentious. And so, but of course, we pay a lot of attention to them because they're famous and they're rich and they have the power of budgets and the power of armies. But can the army impose on Afghanistan a change in the way people think? No. Okay. And it's really important, I think, in the current context, and I said this in my talk, to recognize that every period in history has its own complexity. There's not a time which is more complex or less complex. Our world is complex. It's emergent. It's a state, not a variable. But the current complexity that we face, the current emergence, birth, and death that we face, are quite dramatic in some ways. Because we're seeing, for instance, the end of the dominance of men over women that has lasted for thousands of years. This is a very difficult transition. We don't know how to live differently. We don't know how to be humans in a different power structure. So we're not going to get it right the first time. And there's going to be many people who feel frightened. Yeah. And also there's going to be many people who feel they're losers.
Yeah.
Men are losing power. Women are gaining power. Men have to do things they didn't do before. Now, that's a difficult transition. And I say very openly, I need to die to liberate the younger generations to do things differently. They may want to respect me. I may resist the change. And when I'm gone, that means that they have the liberty to create things and do things in new ways, in different ways. Absolutely. And for me, that's an important gift. Yeah. If I'm going to be a generous parent, Absolutely. It's not to impose myself forever in some statue or some book to say you must be obedient to who I am, but rather allow each generation to build its own world
their own way,
modestly in their own context.
Amazing. So just another interesting takeaway from your conversation was you mentioned about flying cars.
Yeah.
And very interesting. Yeah. So it's been 100 years. There's still no flying cars. No. By the way, they're still saying that Bangalore would be getting in end of this year. There's a company called Sarala Aviation. I mean, that's a different story.
We may get flying cars.
But I mean, we've been talking for the last 100 years. But similar predictions, there are a lot of tech leaders, so-called futurists would predict saying that AGI would be achieved by 2030, 2032. So there has been a lot of these conversations. Yeah. So what are your take on this?
I mean, there's a lot of issues there, but let me declare my position very clearly from the beginning. I am not a von Neumann-Turing believer. Okay. I don't think quantity becomes quality.
Understood.
Okay. And so I do not think that the current approach to creating sentience,
Understood.
Which has nothing to do with quantity of data or the number of synapses that are being imitated, is the way to create another sentient being.
Understood.
So I do not see sentience and Skynet as an issue at all. This is a false existential kind of terror tactic that's going to help sell technology.
Understood.
Because it keeps it in the headlines and it preys like predator. It preys on human fears that are related to our guilt around destruction. And by this I mean, if you look at the Frankenstein myth story, which shows that the doctor creates the monster and the monster kills the doctor.
Yes.
It's the sense that we have overstepped our bounds, that we're going beyond who we're supposed to be. But this is something that I think is based on our fears and our sense of the destructiveness of the way we relate to the world, which Mary Shelley, when she wrote the book, was very much inspired by the destruction of the Industrial Revolution in England. So we're replaying with sentient AGI and that a kind of basic fear that's haunted the entire industrial era. And we fall prey for it because we're actually kind of programmed for it. We've seen Skynet, we've seen Terminator, we've seen and these stories help us to imagine the future, but they also confine our imagination because they're so easy to relate to. They're so well done. The stories are so fascinating, and we fall into the trap of thinking the techno-utopia, a la Wakanda in Black Panther, is the future. But these are things that actually reduce our imagination. They make our imagination lazy, and they incorporate ways of thinking that I think are fundamentally false. Our tools are not separate from us. We are our tools.
Got it. Pretty intense, like.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that answers most of the things. So someone who's watching this and listening to it, how should they deal with such kind of fears or misinformation? If I'm watching, I don't know, I have no clue about any of these. What should I ask first, or what is my go-to way of, rather than just being a zombie or a philosophical zombie, or just follow
the kind of thing that comes to my mind is that, let's say you're in a country or a region where a lot of the people don't know how to read and write.
Understood.
Okay? But they have a radio or maybe a television, right?
Makes sense.
And so you broadcast on the air and you say, guess what? You can learn to read and write. Now, everybody watching this and all of us here, we know how to read and write. And we learned how to do it. But when we started, well, it wasn't so obvious. But what was obvious was that we knew how to speak. We knew how to talk. And so we understood that reading and writing was about words that people can speak, and we can record them and share them, etc. So you see how it augments your capacity. Yeah. Well, I want to say to everybody, you anticipate all the time. You anticipate in different ways, for different reasons, in different contexts. Learn something about it. Everybody can learn about it by thinking about it, by doing their own reflection, but also by accessing the work that's being done around the world around futures literacy. We're just at the beginning, in the same way that we're just at the beginning, once upon a time, of reading and writing. Okay? Yes. And so I think for people who are interested in being less frightened, less opposed to uncertainty, less kind of irritated, our plan didn't go right, it's the end of the world. To be able to overcome fear of the future and to be able to appreciate novelty, things that we did not imagine in the past but are around us now, that have new meanings, new ways of thinking about life, that's what futures literacy allows us to do.
Got it. And can you just take me through, or take the audience, like futures literacy, how did it come about? What is the history or origin behind this, and why it is important?
I mean, I've been invited for many years to help people think about the future. My first big project was in Ontario in Canada. We spent 2 years how to think about the future of education. And what I noticed was how difficult it is. So when you say it's difficult, you say to yourself, is it the teacher's fault or is it the student's fault? From my point of view, it was the teacher's fault, which is that the way I was conducting this didn't work. I was asking people to imagine the future when they didn't know what it meant. They were getting confused. And instead of them feeling more empowered, they were feeling actually less kind of able to do it. Forget it. Let somebody else, let the expert deal with the future. So for the last 30 plus years, I've been trying to figure out how we can become better at becoming futures literate. And like I said, learning by doing is really the way to go about it at first, because you can surface from within yourself the difference between probable futures and desirable futures. So let me just give that as a little example. If you think about it, and I ask you, why didn't you buy a lottery ticket? Why didn't you play a game of chance? And you say, wow, the odds are really ridiculous. There's no chance that I'll win. If I look at the past and I have a model of the future, then I can see that it's a waste of money. So that's one way of thinking about the future. But then if I give you 10 million, and you have a lot of money, what are you going to do with it? Well, your mind's going to go in all different directions, fantasies, friends, things that you didn't even think about. Oh, now I can go and travel there. I can learn. So all the horizons open. You're thinking about it emotionally. You're thinking about it differently. You're not thinking about it as if you were calculating the past. Okay, it's not probabilistic, it's open and imaginative fantasy. These are fundamentally different ways of thinking about the future. If you confuse those two, and you say, what's probable, what's desirable, and somebody says to you, be reasonable, be realistic, keep your feet on the ground. Oh, you're a dreamer, be pragmatic. What you'll do is you'll close down your desirable future, and you'll just go to your probable future. And what will your probable future be? What you heard in the newspaper yesterday, what Hollywood sent you, what Bollywood sent you yesterday, what somebody's scare tactics, because it makes for good sensation about AI and its, sentience. And you'll have these thin, weak, I call this poverty of the imagination.
All right.
And in the poverty of the imagination, you'll feel frustrated and you'll think, look, the future is so important because my hopes and my fears are associated with the future, but I don't know how to think about it, so forget it. I'll let somebody else think about it, the expert, the horoscope, the great leader, they'll think about it and they'll tell me. Then you're losing it. But what I'm saying to people is that you can become futures literate by looking into, it's just Google it, and you'll find futures literacy.
Amazing. So, I mean, from your experience, I mean, I'm really privileged and honored to be meeting you today. I think from whatever questions I've been asking and all of that, I kind of get the sense of clarity in terms of how you think in futures literacy is there. So I want to know, like, you've traveled a lot of places. How do you view India as a place? Like, what potential do you see in this country? You've been an economist as well.
Well,
I
want to say that the Hubba Festival and the Futures Hub at the festival are, for me, wonderful exemplars of creating a fertile environment.
Understood.
Of creating a context where people can think together and be inspired and encounter difference. And I think the wonderful thing about a festival and the wonderful thing about the futures part of this festival is that it's allowing us to see that there's a diversity of ways of thinking about the future. What I hope I add to the mix is a kind of systematic or more kind of reference points that allow us to think about the future a little bit more clearly and with a little bit more confidence. So it's not just a question of understanding the diversity of points of view, but understanding why they're diverse. Understood. So if you see the difference between an apple and an orange, you see the difference. Yeah. But if I talk to you about the future, you can't see it, and you don't know the difference between a probable future and a desirable future unless you think about it. Understood. Unless you think about why it's different, how it's different, and the importance. Because it makes you look at different things. If you get the 10 million, you're going to go and look at that's the vacation I wanted to take. You're going to go look at that. Yeah. But if you talk about probability, you say, well, I don't have the money for that. I'm not going to look at the vacation. You don't even look.
Understood.
So these different futures change what you see.
Absolutely.
This is about perception.
Got it.
And there's a really strong tendency to conflate perception and choice. So I think that this kind of festival opens up new horizons for people to distinguish something as important as thinking about the future by exposing them to different and diverse ideas of the future, but also being able to clarify and understand that there are different kinds of futures, that those different futures are fundamental to the way we see the world, and that then we make choices. And I just want to make that you can't choose something you can't perceive.
Yeah.
If I tell you choose blah, 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 you're going to say, what is it? I can't choose it. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
So perception precedes choice. And our imagination, our hopes and our fears are fundamental for the way we see the world. So all of this is like learning to read and write. It's a skill. It's a competence. And I think that festivals like this are fundamental to making that move forward. And my impression is that the diversity that characterizes India is a very rich environment for being able to observe the diversity of ways of thinking about the future, including the very local ones. Meaning our image of the future is connected to the myths and the stories that our parents and our grandparents told us. And those are different from one part of India to the other. Yep. And they play a fundamental role in how our imagination works. And the better we understand the local character of time, of hope, of fear, of obedience, of disobedience, the more we understand all that, the more we understand where our fears and hopes come from. Because those are the things that shape our imagination. So I feel that India is a wonderfully fertile and rich environment for developing futures literacy.
Amazing. Last question before I let you go. So in Bangalore, right? You're in Bangalore. So how do you, a person who is like, been in this, who is like futures literacy, like following it on a day-to-day basis, understanding it in the realistic way. How does one say solve like a traffic problem in Bangalore, right? So there's a lot of congestion. So I think there's a report by Hub which said like the second largest congestion place is Bangalore. We've all been part of it, but we don't know how to solve it.
Part of this problem is that you think you can solve it.
Oh, right.
Okay, so the minute you begin to just do problem solution things, where's my magic wand? Can I find my magic wand? I'm going to solve this problem. I'm going to have the fix, right?
Okay.
So do you have the fix? No, you don't have it. You have the fix? Who has the fix? and then your fix is better than my fix. But there's a really much deeper problem here.
Understood.
And it's the problem of the way we live and we think about life.
Understood.
And our relationship. And there is a huge inertia. We can't abstract from the fact that we live in this very interdependent and legacy systems. We are incredibly confined by path dependency. Okay?
Understood.
Now, what we're talking about here is like the change from illiteracy, no reading and writing, to reading and writing. What you can do when you can, it's like the cell phone or the fax machine. The old example used to be the fax machine. The people here don't care about the fax machine, but there was a time when everybody was saying, if you have only one fax machine, it's completely useless.
Yeah.
So if there's only one person that's futures literate, it's completely useless. In the same way that if only one person can read and write, or a few people, the elite, then it's just for the elite. But if everybody can read and write, then all of a sudden all sorts of things change. So today we're in a position where we have been for thousands of years extracting and colonizing and conquering and using the future as a weapon. Okay? And futures literacy might change that. What will happen? I don't know. Will it be better? I don't know. And I'm not promising it'll be better, because if you learn to read and write, you can use it for poetry, you can use it for hate. Okay? I don't know what you're going to do with it. In the same way, being futures literate, will it be for good or bad? Will it be used by good people or bad people? I don't know. But what I do know is that if you're futures literate, you feel more comfortable in this universe, and I hope, less likely to want to conquer, to impose, to colonize the future.
Understood. In terms of colonizing the future, I might sound repetitive again and again. So there is a lot of this conversation around, universal basic income, universal high income, coming into picture. So what is your take on that? And just, I think, very interesting, I'll come to that later. You spoke about blockchain disappearing from the entire, no talks of blockchain.
Well,
very interesting about that.
It got, there's a lot of examples of technologies that don't do what they're expected to do, right?
Understood.
And then afterwards, many years later, they do something else completely.
Understood.
So that's always, because tools are not what determine, it's the humans that determine the tools. So that's you got to flip that around. But from the point of view of solving problems again, we have to experiment. That's the crucial thing. But how can I do an experiment if I don't see it? So again, perception becomes central. And there's two aspects here that are related to innovation. So let's talk about innovation for traffic. One is, can I invent new experiments?
Understood.
So I need to be able to let go of the past to do something new. Okay? The other thing is, if my experiment fails, do I understand why it failed? In other words, do I think it's just because my idea of the past is good and I simply just didn't find the right combination? Or maybe my way of thinking is not actually a good way of thinking. And we know from the history of science that the vast majority of big breakthroughs occur when you question your underlying assumptions. When you say, the reason I thought this was good or this would work actually doesn't have anything to do with the way it's working. And we break out of our narrow frameworks, our models, and our systems. And we begin to see that there are other systems, other models. So what about nomadism? What about immaterial production? What about my thousands of avatars that allow me to endogenize my values through experience and simulation? All of that's possible. But in today's world, it's constrained by a lot of powers from the past, a lot of inertia from the past, and people who want to actually reproduce the past. Because they say, if I reproduce the past, you already know what it is. Let's make it great again. You can feel safe.
Understood.
But this is a way of putting yourself in opposition to the creative nature of the universe. It's not because people are ideological, I think, that we think about change. It's because change is the way the universe works.
Understood. Pretty interesting. Thank you for that. And just ending on a philosophical note, I'm sorry, I'm very good at asking last question. I don't know why. So
Go for it.
So yeah. So last question on the philosophical side. Just want to know, like, when what if there is no wrong in the world? There's only like we say, like, truth and right. So how do you define that? Like,
I don't know.
You don't know it.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to pronounce. I go to many parts of the world
Understood.
where people have different ideas of the truth.
Understood.
Okay? But everywhere I go in the world, we realize that humans are not the truth. And so humans have to work, live with ambiguity and openness and uncertainty. And if we try to eliminate uncertainty, we simply create toxic, psychotic kind of shock because we're pretending we don't live in this universe. This universe is full of uncertainty, and we should turn uncertainty into a friend for improvisation, for meaning, for spontaneity, for ephemerality. There's a huge attachment to continuity, permanence, preservation. And look, we end up with a huge amount on your shoulders, and you spend your entire life repairing what they built before.
Yeah.
Is that the point?
No. That's Riel Miller. Thank you so much for being on Front Page.
My pleasure.
Wonderful conversation, and I'm sure you guys are going to like it. This is Front Page. Like, share, subscribe, and always remember, think AI.
And think futures literacy.
Think AI.